Hello, everybody. Happy Wino Wednesday. Happy finally below 100 degrees day. I was scared it was going to be another just like 110 degrees day, and it just makes wine taste more heavy when it's that warm outside. So I'm actually glad that the wine will be a little bit more refreshing now that it's just a brisk 87. Super excited for tonight's class. So we're kicking off the soil series class. So we're going to get really nerdy about the dirt of the vineyards. So very excited. We're not going to do these classes consecutively. I want to break it up and still do the blind tasting classes. If you didn't get the email with all the other classes, it's on the front page of the that 4-pack of wine that you got delivered. Has the class schedule in it for August, and I'll be posting it online shortly. If you're tuned in, just go ahead and put in the chat room who you are, where you're coming from or hailing from or tuned in live from. And if you can't access the chat room, it's probably because you're not logged in. So on the upper right-hand corner, if you see that little emblem and just has a blank person that says sign in, then you're not signed in. So you have to sign in to whatever email account is connected to your YouTube so that you can use the chat room. Really highly suggest that. That's a way for me to interact with you more and answer all the questions and see your comments about the wine as well. So definitely make sure you're signed in so you can participate in the chat room. If you're playing this on a big screen TV, it's easiest if you also have it playing on like a phone, just on mute, so that you can more easily type in your comments rather than using the remote to that really awkward keyboard up there. So, hey, James and Danielle from Virginia Beach, great to see you. Ryan, hey, hello, cheers. Lori and Brad coming from Suffolk, fabulous to see all of you. Or I don't see you. I promise I don't have weird secret cameras hidden that I'm watching you. But that would be interesting, I'm sure. I'd get a more in-depth look at how you all enjoy wine. Dominica and Sam from Williamsburg, great to see you. Kate and Caleb and Elizabeth and Joe from Norfolk, fabulous. Glad our wine didn't cook yesterday. That made me so nervous. I'm glad we got it all figured out. I gotta say, yesterday it was so hot. I drove back to people's houses if they didn't text me back right away saying that they got their wine to go pick up the wine, because more than 5 minutes outside and the wine would start to cook. So it was a little scary for me yesterday delivering wine in this heat, but glad it's cooler now. So, all right. So I know some people are newer to these virtual classes. Some people are brand new to the virtual classes. I know my whole crew from Atlantic Shores is tuned in, so hopefully you can hear this and you're tuned in all right. I miss you guys so much. I miss doing live classes. Until then, this will have to do. And it is fun because it's a way for me to reach people from all over, and you can connect a little bit more too, whether you're in Virginia Beach or Williamsburg or anywhere in between. So happy that this technology exists. Hopefully we can get back to in-person events soon. So Monty and Michelle and Suffolk, great to see y'all. You don't have to have these wines to tune in for this class. So tune in, learn a little bit about Volcanic Vineyards, and then we're going to get more in depth into the tasting of these 4 wines. So everyone should have 4 wines, 2 whites and 2 reds. I'm going to switch up the order just to keep you on your toes. Don't worry, I'm going to switch up the order of the very first wine, not the end, where it will be hard to keep track. This is the wine we're actually going to pour first. So on your tasting sheets, it's listed as wine number 2. We are going to actually serve this first, trying them all side by side right before this class. It made more sense because the flavors of this are so strong and so incredibly powerful that I kind of wanted to get the palate shock out of the way so it doesn't kind of mess up the flow of the tasting event. So if you have this and it's chilled, hopefully it's already open. Hopefully you had no problem with the wax on top. Wax can be really frustrating sometimes. If it's too hard, especially older wax, will get really hard and like chip everywhere as soon as you try and do it. So the trick is, this is already opened, but this is how you do it. You put your palm of your hand on top of the wax cap and just twist the bottle. The friction of your hand on the wax will warm up the wax a little bit and soften it. So you can more easily just use the knife or the blade of your wine key and easily cut the cap off super, super simply. So just a little tidbit for the future. Invinite always uses this really soft wax, so it shouldn't be a problem. But in the future, if you ever get those wax tops and they're giving you problems, that's how you would do it. You can even like hold a lighter underneath it and just like warm it up just slightly. And that helps as well. So go ahead and pour yourself this very first wine. 3-4 ounces or so. We're gonna taste this. It's got a lot to smell and taste in this wine. So you're gonna want a little bit more than, just like a 1 ounce tasting of this. So Tawana is tuning in later and she'll see these comments, which will be great because she'll know that everyone missed her. Tawana attends every class along with obviously Som Mom and Som Pop, which say hello, hello. So yes, it's just the great thing about these YouTube classes is you can tune into the recording if you aren't able to tune in live. So yes, it does. Yes, we are going to get into the weirdness of this wine. So this class is not like the blind tasting classes. So it's not going to be as in-depth in terms of focusing on the smell and the taste of each individual wine. It's going to be part of it, but you can taste at your own pace for all of these wines. So no need to like rush through it. Also no need to wait until I start tasting the wine. This class is going to be a little bit more heavy on the science side of it, the geology side of it, and what we do and do not know about how soil affects the overall taste of wine. So smell this wine, taste through it, enjoy it, hopefully. If you have some cheese or some charcuterie, it will be enhanced with this wine. It's definitely more of a food-friendly wine. Their online tasting notes said that they recommend it being paired with roasted goat. So in case any of you are roasting some goat tonight, it might be a perfect pairing with this wine. So soil, why does it matter? And by the way, when we use the word soil in wine world, we use that term very loosely because there's very little actual topsoil in any of the best vineyard sites all over the world. Sometimes less than 6 inches of topsoil. Other than that, we're definitely basically rocks, different types of rocks, and different textures of rocks. So on this page right here, you should all have this kind of like a soil background and context to it. On the very, very bottom, it says soil textures. So gravel, sand, silt, clay, loam, and loess. They're all textures. They can be made up of any actual type of broken down rock, but that's a texture. So when we think of gravel, it could be made up of granite, it could be made up of slate, it could be made up of volcanic material or sedimentary material or anything in between. So we'll talk some about the textures and some about the actual rock types throughout these soil series classes. But this class is all about volcanic soil. So basically, there are several different types of volcanoes. You have your rifting volcanoes, which are as tectonic plates pull apart from each other. It creates in the hole as these tectonic plates pull apart. Then you have tectonic plate subduction, where 2 plates are coming together. One plate is forced underneath it, usually the oceanic plate, is forced underneath the continental plate, pushing this up, and then that pressure gets so intense that it has to have some way of escaping, so you get volcanoes that way. All along the Pacific coast of the United States of America, and all the way down South America as well, you have the Ring of Fire. That is what that is. So subduction, creating these tectonic plate subduction, creating these pressure volcanoes. Then you have hot spot volcanoes, and that is basically, think of Canary Islands or even Hawaii, hot spot volcanoes, where it's really just like not related to either tectonic plates pulling apart or subduction. It's just this spot where the pressure from underneath the Earth's core is coming up to the surface through volcanoes. So 3 different types of volcanoes, and then within that, you're going to have different soils in the vineyards based on how old the volcano is, how fresh it is, whether that volcanic soil is pumice, those really sponge-like, very lightweight rocks that you can kind of break apart in your hand, but they're so lightweight they're going to float in water. You can have volcanic ash. You can have basalt as well, which is hardened lava. And kind of so many different textures in between all of those as they become more weathered or more broken down or more mixed with other soil types. So tons of variety there, whether you're a different type of volcano or a different type of soil or a mixture of multiple different types of volcanic soil. Every different area in the world that has volcanic vineyards is going to vary drastically. So it's a very tough thing to put all in one category. There's one guy who's kind of attempted to do this in a book called Volcanic Wines, John Szabo. He's a Canadian master sommelier. And I tried to get the book in time, and I was going to give away one copy of the book, but it's out of stock and I couldn't get it for another 2 weeks. I guess everyone's reading up on volcanic wines right now. But definitely highly recommend his wine. That's SZABO. I was not typing. John SZABO is the author and master sommelier. And basically he traveled all around the world, realized that some of his favorite wines were all grown in volcanic soil, whether that's Santorini, Greece, Canary Islands, Hungary, Willamette Valley, Oregon, Lake County, California, and so many different other areas. And he wanted to figure out why these wines are so interesting. So before we get into what makes volcanic wine special, I want to talk about what science doesn't know about soil and how it affects wine. So anecdotally, sommeliers, other wine professionals, tasters, and just onophiles all over, we taste wine, we talk about it smelling mineral, we talk about minerality in wine, we talk about tasting the minerality in wine on our tongue. We talk about tasting, oh, it tastes ashy, or we taste like chalky. We use these descriptors, and yet to this day, there's still no scientific evidence that explains why wines can taste like the minerals that are found in the soils that the vines are grown. And here's why. So the root hairs are super, super tiny, and they're absorbing nutrients found in the water that's in the soil or rocks, of the vineyards. They can only absorb anything that's water soluble. So certain nutrients like iron, calcium, magnesium, potassium, all of those things are water soluble. But when you think about granite is not water soluble. You think about pumice stone is not water soluble. Even the ash, even though it can be super, super powdery fine, not water soluble. So the root hairs themselves can't absorb these mineral nutrients. They can absorb nutrients, yes, but not these they can absorb mineral nutrients, but not just the minerals themselves unless they are water soluble. So it doesn't really make any sense how we can taste some of these minerals in our wine, but we do. And science is still going to figure that out. I think it's going to be the question of the 21st century in the wine world. Now that we understand fermentation so much better and the controlling of fermentation, we're going to understand this hopefully a lot better in the coming decades. But until then, there's just a lot of unknowns. And here's what I'm going to posit. This is what I've been positing for a couple of years now since I started getting really nerdy about studying the geology of vineyards, is that along the outside of a grape, the vine produces this wax to protect it. It's natural. It's not like the wax found in your apples by grocery stores to make them shiny and perfect. It's natural wax produced by the vine to keep the berries from blistering in the sun or piercing or bursting at all, just this extra level of strength and protection around each individual berry. Well, this wax is rigid, kind of like if you look at it under a microscope, it looks mountainous, very rigid. It's not smooth textured. And it is sticky, so it's going to absorb things that are kind of in the air around it, which is why if lavender is growing next to your vineyards, you'll often smell lavender in the wine, because these oils, these esters and essential oils in the air get trapped by the wax around this grape. Thus, it gets made into the wine. It becomes part of the wine. So I think one of the reasons that we can smell things that are chalkier and ashier is because that is so fine that it can be stirred up in the air and maybe trapped by the wax of the berries. So rather than the minerals, the flavor coming up through the roots, it's maybe coming from what's stirred up in the air around and thus captured by the wax of the grape. No scientist has ever said this. No sommelier has ever said this. This is just my own conjecture. I have no idea about its validity. So if anyone is a science nerd out there, I see my mom taking notes, like she wants to talk to me about this afterwards. They're both science heads. So it's an option. It's a possibility and something that I'd like to explore more scientifically. So here's how we know soil does affect the taste of wine, or does affect the health of the vine overall. One, it's all about food and water. So in order for the grapevine to thrive, to produce the best fruit, it has to have access to the nutrients that it needs from the soils and water itself. So different types of soil are going to capture nutrients and water better. So in areas that you have a lot of rain, you might want more drainage in your soils so that the vine doesn't get overwatered and then it becomes really lazy. Vines make the best grapes when they struggle a little bit. So you might want a more gravelly texture of soil so that it provides really great drainage, and so the vine has to struggle a little bit. And you also want pockets of nutrients. So this is why limestone or pumice can be so amazing in terms of capturing pockets of nutrients and water, even during drought season. So say it's drought season, the vine still needs water and nutrients because it's still growing and trying to thrive. And so these little porous pockets in either limestone, like calcareous limestone, or in pumice stone, allows for these pockets of water and nutrients to be captured at all different layers of the soil. So it allows a vine to kind of survive and stay stable even during periods of drought. So that's the porosity and how it comes into play. Permeability is really interesting because the vine root has to go down, right, to access these deep waters and nutrients that are found deeper down below the first, 2 feet of a soil layers. So if it's solid basalt, that's hardened lava, the vine is not going to be able to permeate that. And if it's solid granite, the vine's not going to be able to permeate that. So you do need some level of permeability. There's some areas like in Portugal and the Mosel region where they've actually just literally chiseled out cracks in the rocks for a vine to start growing. And then as it strengthens, the vine root will continue to break up the rock, but you have to give it a starting point. So some parts in the Canary Islands, actually, they have chiseled out holes to basically create some sort of head start for the vine, so it has a surviving chance. So permeability is really important in that. Other factors, how soil affects the vine health and overall taste of the vine, are resistance to erosion. Right, so that's why you have all these terraced vineyards where these like walls are built up, and then there's a row of vines, and then the wall built up and a row of vines. Because over time, whether it's wind or rain, you're going to have erosion, and all of the topsoil from the top of the mountain is going to be brought down, which is why usually the top of the mountain is the least fertile vineyards, and the lower, the valley parts, are way more fertile. Well, fertility in soil is actually not necessarily what you want when you're making great wine. It's what you want when you're growing tomatoes and squash and zucchini and all the great things people are eating fresh from their garden right now. But when you're making really, really high quality wine, you want the vine to think it's about to die. Because if the vine thinks it's about to die, it's an invasive species. It's just trying to take over the planet. And so if it thinks it's about to die, it's like, I'm going to spend all of my energy then in creating the best grapes possible that are super juicy, super ripe, super sweet, that's going to attract the birds to my vine first, so then the birds will eat my berries and spread my seed throughout the world, and hopefully I can propagate. So that's what's going on in the brain's like genetic brain that, doesn't have a brain, but in its genes, that's what it's thinking. And so if a vine is struggling, whether it's low fertility in the soil, too much drainage, so it's struggling to get the water, then it's going to put all of its energy, instead of growing, into making the best berries possible. So you do want that safe balance where it has enough energy to make really great berries, but not so much that it's growing instead of producing really great fruit. So that's a little bit of a breakdown of just like Soil 101. We're going to talk more about volcanic soil as we go on, but I really want your thoughts on this wine here. So if you haven't already like thought about what you're smelling and tasting this wine, think about it and try and name a couple things. And I'll tell you real quickly about this producer. So the producer itself is Envinate, which is right down here on the bottom. It's a made-up Spanish word that basically translates to "go wine yourself," which I think is brilliant. It's a co-op of 4 different producers, and they operate in the Canary Islands of Spain, Spanish territory, but it's 70 miles off the coast of Morocco, this hotspot volcanic islands that are pretty high altitude because they jut up so high in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. 700 miles off the coast of Spain, but Spanish territory, so it is Spanish wine. Because of its high elevation, you're able to have still cooler climate grapes here. All volcanic sand on this island specifically of Tenerife, because they're very, very, very old, ancient volcanic islands. So they've been weathered down, and it's black volcanic sand, not specifically this producer, but this island here. So if y'all can see, this is how black the soil is. So it's black volcanic sand. It's weathered down from basalt and ash, but fully weathered down. So it's very, very, very powdery. The texture is sand. Don't think sand like we have on Virginia Beach. That's just a texture of broken down rocks. Texture is sand, and it's broken down volcanic soil. Very, very black, very heavy in iron, magnesium, and sulfur, and calcium. Very, very low in potassium, interestingly enough. So you can have some very, very acidic wines. Higher potassium in the soil makes for lower acidity in your wine overall. Still don't understand why exactly, but ask me after I get my geology PhD, and I'll let you know. But as you can see, they have these built-in walls kind of around each different bush vine. So these vines are trellised really low, almost like the Santorini basket grapes, but not quite. They're kind of untrellised and untrained and kind of just grow out and along the vine. They keep being clipped off. The walls protect it from these very high winds in the Atlantic Ocean, right around the Atlantic Ocean. So to keep the vines from just blowing over and being torn up, and these pumice stones from being whipped into the air and bursting the grape clusters, they put these walls around just where the winds come from. So it's not a full circle of walls. It's just protecting the winds. There are other areas like in other of the islands, of the Canary Islands, that have these like deep pits. Instead of walls, they have these deep pits, and sometimes they have terraces. Each different island kind of has their different tradition, but they've been growing grapes there since the 1600s, possibly before, but majorly since the 1600s. It was a stopping point for the European colonizers as they went to Americas. They'd stop there, kind of refill on wine, and keep going. So very fascinating. The grape is leased on Prieto, and everything I've ever had from the Canary Islands, whether it's been white, red, or rosé, has had this smell to it, this really funky, wild, almost bizarre-like fermented sour smell to it. Really interesting wines. Tell me what you are smelling. James and Danielle already said that animalistic smells like sweaty saddle leather, sometimes like horse manure. Definitely that animalistic sweatiness. So Steve Hill, my dad, says, I got a lot of ripe pear and apricot. Yes, dying blossoms, slate and ginger. I love the ginger call too, and I love that the condition of those blossoms are dying, because there's something like rotting about this wine, whether it's, apples as you're making natural apple cider, or maybe you just like cut up the apples and forgot about them and put them in your refrigerator and found them like a month later. That kind of like natural fermentation, definitely there's like something decaying going on in there. And that ginger call, it does have that kind of spice to it all. So Kate says nail polish remover and manure. Okay, yes. That nail polish remover might blow off, because Generally, if you smell nail polish remover, it's a fault in the wine coming from a wine that was too reductive, meaning no oxygen was involved in the winemaking process. And this wine, actually, really interesting. So 100% Listan Blanco is the name of the grape. And 75% of it, they press the juice off the skins of the grape immediately. 25% of it, you actually have them aged in these open tanks, and they're trodden by foot regularly, and they hang out with the skins of the grape for 14 to 40 days for this one particular wine. And yes, trodden by foot, it's a thing. I did it in Oregon for a month when I worked harvest last year. Yes, people still do it. No, it's not like I Love Lucy, because it's not just 6 inches. These tanks are like 6 feet deep, and you're just like pushing down the grapes skins because they all float to the top and the juice is on the bottom. You have to constantly stir them up. So that is exactly how this wine is made. And no, what you are smelling is not feet. It's not smelling like this because people's feet were in your wine, I promise you. It is still sterile, it's all fermented, so you're all good. Greed on the barnyard, some sulfur, right? So because volcanic soil, literally all the minerals from underneath the earth crust were being pulled up. You have really high contents of sulfur. Wait till we get to the next white wine. It's literally grown in sulfuric rock. It's pretty crazy. And pretty intense on the smell of that. Oh my gosh. I could just smell this wine, I think, the rest of the night and still be getting more things that I'm smelling from it. Some mom says unripe pineapple. Yeah, that kind of like bitter core. You bite too far into it. Rotten bananas. Cool. I like the underripe and the rotten part both coming on in this wine. Super dusty. Okay. White pepper and wet wool. Interesting. A little bit of that lanolin in the wine. Yeah. And if you like the smell of wet wool, tune in next week for the class on Chenin Blancs. We're going to be doing 4 different Chenin Blancs, and that's often a characteristic found in Chenin Blanc. So, C-Phil says, I forgot, does sheeting indicate low alcohol content or high? Sheeting is after you swirl the wine settles and falls down the inside of the glass and forms these legs or teardrops or drips or whatever you want to call them. If the whole rim breaks apart, almost like Windex, instead of all forming legs and falling down, it's kind of breaking apart and turning into how Windex would look if you sprayed it on glass. That's called sheeting, and that indicates pretty low alcohol content. It also indicates glasses that were freshly polished. So sometimes wines can fool you. This wine is 12.5%, so it is on the lower side, but not extremely low. So it's probably a combination of both first wine we have in our glass and lower alcohol content wine. Great questions. What else are y'all smelling and tasting this wine? Did the taste surprise you? Is the taste different than the smell, or did it confirm the palate? Is it spot on? About to taste it now for the second time. Wow. Talk about acidity, right? Holy acidity. My mouth is puckering a whole lot, watering a whole lot. My eyes are watering a little bit. Yes, it would pair with roasted goat perfectly. The wildness, the gaminess, the high acidity would like work with that fat. Goat has higher fat content. I could see that working really well. And if goat's not your thing, goat cheese would actually be a really perfect pairing as well. Goat cheese with some, like spread it with like like garlic where you roast the whole bulbs kind of thing. I like and cook it so it's almost mushy, and you spread the garlic and the goat cheese on a crostini. Oh my gosh, such an amazing little appetizer there. James says, like licking wet rock, right? So this is one of those vocabulary things that we use to describe minerality in wine. And science doesn't think that it's real, but it is real. It is absolutely like licking wet rocks for sure. Stuck around on the mouth, yeah. So where I get minerality when I'm drinking wines that are highly, highly like mineral is on my tongue. And it's more of a tactile sensation where it almost feels like my tongue is like it's kind of dancing on my tongue. It's tingling on my tongue. So rather than tannins that just kind of draw out your mouth and they stay they just hang out there, I feel like there is this movement with minerality, and it's really around like the edges of my tongue. So get this wine in your mouth, swish it around, swirl it around. Again, I know it's a funky wine. Kind of wanted to get the funky wine out of the way, and then we can get into the different wines. Wanted to get the most bizarre one kind of while our palates were still fresh. But make sure you get a big enough sip in your mouth. Get it all throughout your mouth. Swish it around like mouthwash. Let it hang out in your mouth a little bit, and then concentrate on that feeling of what the wine, the finish of the wine is doing on your tongue, and think about that texture and that tactile sensation that you are hopefully getting. Now, if you just brushed your teeth or just smoked a cigar or just drank some bourbon, you might have a little less sensitivity to that sensation, but should still be there. Wow. It's hard not to concentrate on the acidity of the wine, but when you do and you concentrate on the texture of your tongue, it's real and it's totally there. Steve says it seems to have some tannins in the gums. Yes, absolutely. So the tannins, not common for white wines because normally the juice of the grapes is pressed off immediately. Tannins, that bitter, mouth drying sensation up in your gums, that comes from the skin of the grapes. Well, normally white wine doesn't have skin contact hardly at all. Well, 25% of this wine was aged from 14 to 40 days with the skins. So yes, you're absolutely going to get some tannins in this wine, which is why this white wine could be served with red meat. I know that's not normally what people think of, but this wine is masculine enough. It's got enough intensity. It's got enough intrigue on the flavor. Acidity is high, tannins are there, minerality, everything's kind of like high-toned in this wine, but it could absolutely be paired with burgers off the grill or something charred, is something a little bit more rich in terms of flavor and texture. So great questions. All right, so now is the million-dollar question. Does anyone like this wine? This is such a polarizing wine, right? Because it's so interesting and weird and funky. So do you like it because it's interesting and weird and funky, or is it kind of not your cup of tea? Or maybe you hated it somewhere along the spectrum. Tell me what you thought about this wine, and we'll go ahead and get started pouring the next wine. Mom, would you mind getting the Benito Flor? It's on the top right corner. Also, this is when I'm going to ask you to put your red wines in the refrigerator if you haven't been storing them like in a wine fridge or something. If they're just on your shelf, unfortunately, it's been so hot lately that our houses are probably, 75, degrees plus. And so your red wine's going to be a little too warm. If we put them in the refrigerator just for the next 20 minutes while we taste this next wine, it should help out the taste of the red wines be a little bit more approachable. So Ada says, I like it. Yes. Now, Ada, which island, I know you said you went to the Canary Islands, which island did you go to, or did you travel throughout all of them? And did you see those black sand beaches? Were you in the islands where the vineyards were kind of dug down in pits, or did you have the semicircle walls off, or the checkerboard? What did the vineyards look like? I know when I talked to you today, you said you had been there, so very curious. James says, like it, but with the acidity has to be with fruit, right? Yeah. If you're not used to just drinking like lemonade without the sugar, then this is pretty acidic. I'm a total acid head, so I really enjoy that about this wine, but it will definitely be tamed down with the food, with some food as well. And Lori says, I'm enjoying it. Awesome. Kate says, it's really pleasant if you drink it but don't smell it. Okay, yeah, Brettanomyces will do that. That barnyard funk is really just on the nose. Now the rest of this wine still is funky, right? You still have those sour notes, that wild fermented kind of like a sour beer or like a cider thing. And that's just the way the grape is, the vineyards are, and the overall wine are from this area. But that Brettanomyces is definitely just on the nose. So if you don't enjoy that, yes, don't smell it. or serve it a little bit cooler. The colder it is, the less it will be apparent on that on the nose. And Brad says he likes it too. Man, I'm impressed. I was really expecting it to be like, hate it, never attending a virtual class again if all your wines are this weird. I'm super impressed with you guys. Thank you. Lanzarote, yeah, saw pits in the walls blocking the wind. Okay, cool. So yeah, there's all these different islands. I would love to go. Hopefully we get to travel again one day. Hopefully Europe lets us back in one day. And I would love to go. That's kind of like on my bucket list to go to the Canary Islands. That's like the first place I'd want to go when I can travel again. So, all right, let us taste our next white wine. Now we're only doing wines. We're not doing them side by side. We're only doing them one at a time. So no need to bring out all of your wine glasses for this. But this next wine probably will be affected by the smell in your glass of the previous wine, that funkiness. So if you, in your glass, whatever's left over, pour it out or drink it, pour yourself just like, a quarter of an ounce or something, swirl it around the glass to kind of let the new wine really get absorbed into the glass and rinsing out the last of the wine. And you can either drink that or dump it out. But that will allow the funkiness of the last wine to not affect the next wine, because this wine is not on the funky side. It's got its own unique smell because this is the wine grown in this like sulfuric rock vineyards. So we are tasting next the white wine number 2. Remember, we switched the orders of the white wines. And Benito Ferrara, Greco di Tufo. Don't rinse out your glasses with water, especially if you are using crystal glassware, because the water will just change the pH balance of your glass and really kind of dumb down and mute the nose of the next wine that you taste. So pour yourself a few ounces of Benito Ferrara, and we'll talk about these vineyards. So we're going to the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco. Now we're going to Campania, Italy, where we're going to be trying 2 wines. This white wine and the second wine as well. So 2 wines from Campania. And normally, like for a class like this, I'd want 4 different regions. But 2 years ago when I was in Italy, I got to meet both of these winemakers and tour their vineyards. And they were so unique and special, and their wines are so incredible that I couldn't choose just one of them to be the feature of Campania, Italy. So I'm just going to have to do a volcanic part 2 class, and we feature some of the other regions in the world that have volcanic wines. So Benito Ferrara, 4th generation viticulturalist, but 1st generation owning their own winery. And this is really common throughout Italy, where you have families that are very involved in the wine making, whether it's the growing side or the making side in the winery. So winemaker or viticulturalist. And then after so many decades, people are like, no, we think we could do this better than the people we work for. We're going to start our own winery and buy these vineyards. And so that's exactly what this group did. Sergio is the name. He named it after his grandfather, Benito Ferrara. So him and his wife are both viticulturalists and both very actively. It's just him, his wife, and his daughter, and that's it. They have some farm hands that they hire just for kind of harvest here and there. But it's the only full-time employees, him, his wife, and his daughters. And same as with the second red that we're going to taste as well. The grape is called Greco. Thought because the Greeks brought it over. It's actually native to this area, but it was really popular among the Greeks. And so the grape itself is Greco. Greco di Tufo is the region, the DOC region within Campania. So you can only make Greco di Tufo and call it Greco di Tufo if it's Greco, the grape, from this region specifically. Tufo is Italian for sulfur. And they have some of the most ancient, still accessible, though not still in operation, sulfur mines in the whole world. And it smells like sulfur. You just like go through the town, and it's just like, man, it just straight up smells like someone burned a match or something like that. And so you get that in these vines, in these wines that are grown in this area. I love how he didn't speak any English while we were over there. So I spoke to him in Spanish, and he spoke to me in Italian, and we somehow figured out what each other was saying. And he said that we were talking about the smell of sulfur and how it is in the wines. And he's like, but it's not like the devil. It's not like you're smelling the devil. It's like you're smelling the devil's mistress that just walked by. And I loved that analogy of like, it's not dangerously sulfuric, right? In terms of its smell. It smells almost like seductive in the way that it has this like hints and aromatics of sulfur in the wine. And its Greco is delightfully feminine as a grape versus Listan Blanco that we just had. It's a pretty masculine grape, pretty intense. We have a much more like subtle, soft, feminine style grape, just with this like hint of sulfur. So I love that analogy of the devil's mistress that just walked by. Just only an Italian could come up with a beautiful poetic way of talking about the devil's mistress. In Campania, Italy, the volcano that has been affecting the soil types of the area is Mount Vesuvius. So destroyed Pompeii back in 76, year 76, that's it, to 76. Since then, it's had little tiny kind of blurps but not full eruptions since 76. But we've had these, I guess they would call them burping, the volcano, just like little bits, but not another destructive eruption. But that eruption of 76 that destroyed Pompeii spread so much ash into the air, these plumes of ash for a very long time. It wasn't just a day that it erupted. It erupted for months, spreading ash throughout. But it literally changed the climate of the area for 15 years. Science shows like a difference of climate for those 15 years because there was so much dust in the air. So rather than this like volcanic islands of Canary Islands, where it's this hard island that's been weathered down, so you have this like ash and sand, but it's heavier particles. Instead, these vineyards throughout Campania are noticeably like this black ash, where if you walk through them, it stirs up the ash in the air, and it's such a fine powdery ash that kind of hangs out suspended in the air. So you can walk through the vineyards for an hour, look back and see your whole trail that you've walked, because you can still see like the trail of black ash that has been stirred up. So really fascinating, just a different type of volcanic soil, and with obviously very, very high sulfur content with these huge sulfur rocks. So as you're digging through the vineyards, they'll just come about this sulfuric rock that is like 3 meters across. So what's that, 9 feet across or so. And we're a little bit less high in elevation. So the Canary Islands, we're up to 900 meters in elevation. I only know meters. Someone do something for me. What's 900 meters in terms of meters? So a little bit less in elevation. So a little bit of a warmer climate, a little bit more Mediterranean influence rather than the harsh winds of the Atlantic. So yellow Laffy Taffy flavor smell. I love it. Butter popcorn over here. Yes. Wait, James, why can't you enjoy your wines in crystal glasses again? Do tell. And then tell me what y'all are smelling and tasting in this wine after someone does some math for me. What 900 versus 500 meters is. Anyone get all these like floral notes in this wine? But rather than like the decaying, rotting flowers of the last one, they're like super fresh and fragrantly delightful. Pineapple, brioche, apricot, and guava. Yes. Dominique, I wasn't even sure if you were going to enjoy the white wines. I'm super glad that you're tuning in with us with the white wines too. Awesome. I love that guava call. In Miami, I went to school there for a little bit, and they, on the beaches, they'd have these like popsicle vendors, and they would sell these like fresh guava popsicles, like literally like they had just, you know, gotten real fresh guavas and just like frozen basically the slush of it, and really delicious. It definitely reminds me of that. Liking it a lot. Nice. Oh no, yes, wine glasses break all the time. Just let me know when you need some more wine glasses. I can definitely help you out. I've got a full storage closet full, although it is dwindling, because I've been going through my glassware a lot too. But yes, I hear you. Breaking glassware is so annoying, and they break so easily. So let's see, Steve Hill gets a lot of green fruit and pineapple. So sulfur is light and honeysuckle or lavender notes. Yes, I love it. So these like really lovely feminine flowers. And the sulfur is there, but not obtrusively so. It's interesting. This is why I switched the order, because I featured this wine in an event this weekend, and we featured it first. And it was definitely like more sulfuric on the nose. And so it's fun to try this afterwards to kind of see the progression change the shape of the wine. Honeydew smell. Yeah, these green melon. I love it. All right, taste the wine. Let's talk to me about acidity. Is this wine more acidic or less acidic than the white wine from the Canary Islands? Man, coming from the nose, we think it's all going to be like delicate and soft and super feminine. It's got some power to it, though. It's got this like salty finish to it, and yeah, this like grippy minerality for sure, and cool. This one is a little bit more acidic, so you feel, and Kate says less. Okay, I like it. A mix of tropical fruits and melon. Yes, 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 all of those. I love how much we were getting on the nose, especially on the fruit things. That. So what about the texture on our tongue? How does the texture on your tongue differ with this wine than it did with the wine from the Canary Islands? And this is why I didn't want to do these wines side by side, because these two white wines are so drastically different, it doesn't help us. And same thing with the reds. They're so drastically different, it's not going to help us to serve them side by side. It just makes the palate overload more apparent. Softer. Okay, so you think it's a softer texture. I would agree with you. So there's way more clay in this soil. So rather than just volcanic sand, which is literally like, that's the only thing that's the Canary Islands, you have calcareous, sandy clay in here as well. So the clay is going to hold on to more of the moisture. So you get a little bit more roundness in the wine, a little bit less of that like fierceness and intensity. And so we have some texture in that, a little bit of more of this chalky note rather than like this really intense, smoky, charred, burnt thing going on. All right, cool. So while y'all enjoying the rest of this, before we go on to the reds, I'm going to talk real quickly just about this section of your Wine 101 Terroir Fundamentals, where we talk about igneous. So both granite and volcanic soils are made from igneous rock, which basically means like what's coming below the Earth's core. The cooling and the solidification of that magma, of what's below the Earth's core. Volcanic is so interesting because it both retains and drains moisture in the soils. So volcanic ash on top is basically, the water is going to go straight through it, but it's also going to prevent the water from evaporating above it. So like topsoil, where it kind of soaks into this topsoil, then the water can evaporate from the top and you're going to lose that ability of the water to get down below. Volcanic ash on the top is going to prevent that evaporation. So it traps the soil further down, which is where the vine needs it. That's why irrigation is so frustrating for vineyard owners, vine tenders, or viticulturalists. Because if you irrigate, then it's only going to permeate the first couple of feet of the soil layers, versus the root hairs. Sometimes like the roots themselves and those like tiny little roots are going down, 30 to 60 feet down below the earth surface. That's where they need the water. So irrigating on the top makes for lazy roots, and it doesn't actually get where it needs to go for a lot of the time. But the volcanic ash allows for the water to drain and not be evaporated out from there. So it's really interesting. It also retains and reflects the heat. So it depends on the color of the soils. Once we get into the next wine, we're going to get into red soils because they're really iron-rich volcanic powdery soils, versus these first two we were in like black soils, and we will be in for the last one as well. So based on the color, we're both reflecting the heat, but you're also retaining it, just the way that The way the rocks and the texture depends on which vineyards you're at, can retain and reflect the heat back onto the vine, so it allows that ripening process to continue to happen even after the sun goes down, which is important to kind of elongate the growing season. So really interesting how, depending on each different type and combination of the different types of volcanic soils, you can have such drastic differences. So overall, this white wine, so much more softer, more elegant, a little bit more feminine. What do you think about it in comparison to the first wine? Can you see a similarity in terms of the volcanic soil? Or is it really, can't tell a difference because they're different grapes and they're not going to taste like a volcano. They're not going to taste ashy necessarily. So can you tell a difference, or is there, can you tell a similarity, or is there no real similarity there at all? And which one did you prefer? If you could pour yourself a glass of one white wine after the class, which one would it be, number 1 or number 2? Samam, what do you think? Pour a glass, which one would you prefer?
Number 2 without food, number 1 with food.
Okay, so Samam says she'd pour just by itself, number 2, the Greco de Tufo. If she's serving it with food, she would serve it with wine number 1 from Canary Islands. We had BLTs beforehand for dinner, and I think the Canary Islands white wine would be actually really amazing with BLT. The acidity of the tomato, that smokiness of the bacon, absolutely. So Danielle, like number 1, okay. Yes, Lori, definitely this one is so much fruitier, right? There was not a whole lot of fruit going on in the wine number 1. If it was like these bitter, weird parts of the fruit, or they're like the skins, or they're rotting, or something like that, or they're fermented. This wine is totally way more fruit forward and floral. I think I could only do a glass of number 2, okay, but a bottle of number 1. All right, I like it. I thought it was going to be the reverse, but I appreciate that. So the sweetness and 2 would eventually overpower you. Interesting. And I wonder if you try, so I'm going to challenge you to do this. After we try the reds, taste the 2 wines again, try them in reverse order, because there's no residual sugar in the Greco de Tufo at all. It's not a sweet wine. It's probably just seeming so because we tried it next to something that was so bitter and funky and wild. But tried it by itself, and I don't think you will have a perception of sweetness of this one. Caitlin, 4 votes go to the Greco de Tufo. Greco. No nonsense. There's typos anytime I type, no matter what, but definitely when I'm drinking wine. Every time I send emails at night, I think I had to respond to 3 people last night. So sorry, that was a typo. I'm sampling my own product, and I was last night. So yes, got that. All right, we are gonna try 2 red wines now. We are going to try a Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. So we're going to the New World. Drastic change of pace, and this should be one of the most interesting Pinot Noirs that you've tried, just based on the style. It's unlike many other Pinot Noirs that I've had. Is that one, Mom, and the one that's on the top shelf? Yeah. And we're going to go back to Campagna for the second red and try our 4th wine of the evening from Italy as well. So no need to rinse. You can rinse out your glass just like we did. Just rinse it with the next wine, just a tiny little bit. And that sulfur, we don't want the next wine to smell like sulfur. It should not smell like sulfur. There's very little sulfur content in this soil type. So whenever you're ready, go ahead and pour yourself some of the Dundee Hills Pinot Noir by Arterbury Marsh. It's just so delicious. So in those vineyards, we were taking a tractor over all of his different vineyards, which there's only like 5 hectares or 10 hectares. So not a huge, that's, it'd be about 25 acres, maybe a little less than that. But we're just in like this kind of truck thing, 4-wheel drive truck going all over. Then we'd stop and like walk throughout the vineyards and then take pictures and get in and hop over here just to show how different the soil was based on each different little vineyard plot. And while I was there, I set down my tasting notebook, like one of these things where I write all of my notes, set it down to take a picture and left it there. And then I didn't realize that it was missing until like after we had gone back to the winery and we're tasting wine and stuff like that, the guy was amazing. He took me in his truck again, and we like drove the entire path until we finally found that notebook. It had been my tasting notebook that I'd used for my entire trip through Italy, and we were like on our last couple of days. And so all of my notes from all of these vineyards that I still reference 2 years later would have been lost were it not for Sergio Ferrara's generosity and hospitality. So I am forever indebted to him for that, and I still love his wines. So this is Arterbury Marsh, and no, there's not a mistake in your wine. This wine is actually just this color. So put on its side and look straight down. White piece of paper works better than. And notice how clear the wine is. The clarity, this is just unbelievable. No cloudiness, no haziness, reflecting the light brilliantly. And that is the true color of Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir tends to be more concentrated than this. The coloring is perfect. That ruby red with that brownish, brickish kind of secondary hues to it, almost slightly tawny. It's not because it's been old. That's just the color of the Pinot Noir grape skins and how they create wines. The concentration is really pale on this. Just that's the way that this winemaker makes wine. So oftentimes in New World Pinot Noir, meaning anything from the Americas, South America, Chile, Argentina, to South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, oftentimes Pinot Noir can be blended with Petite Syrah or Syrah to be made in a more modern, like marketable way so that extraction is there and so that power and intensity is there. They refuse to do that here. As we can tell, there's definitely no deeper, darker grape added to it. And they're not spinning out extra water, which some wineries do to increase that power and concentration. They're just letting the true beauty and like elegance and subtlety of Pinot Noir wine. So this grape is Pinot Noir, and it is from Dundee Hills. Dundee Hills is one of the sub-AVAs or American viticultural areas in Willamette Valley. So it's Willamette, not Willamette. If you're out there, they'll tell you it's Willamette, damn it, to make you remember how to pronounce it, what it rhymes with. So Willamette Valley, Dundee Hills is one of the sub-AVAs. So within Willamette Valley, there's Dundee Hills. And it's one of the key areas that has almost exclusively volcanic soil. Throughout all of Willamette Valley, you have some volcanic vineyards and some marine sedimentary vineyards. And the volcanic vineyards, the soils are coming from literally Washington State volcanoes that have come down south, whether it's ash or anything coming down south. That's very, very weathered, and it's very I want to use the word pulverous. I don't think that is the right word, but it's super, super powdery, almost like talcum powder. It's so fine. And so as soon as you mix like 1 drop of water, whereas strict volcanic ash like we had in Campania, Italy, the water is going to go straight through. This is actually going to stick to it and creates instant cakey mud. So every day out in the Willamette Valley, it rained a lot when we were out there. You're just scraping off the mud by like 2 inches thick every day when we got home. So very, very cakey, powdery volcanic soil here because there's so much iron in it and clay as well. So it's going to retain that moisture really well, which is perfect because in Oregon, you think of how rainy it must be, but they actually get all of their rain between like September and April. So throughout the growing season, hardly rains at all. So you need that soil to retain a little bit more of that moisture. So very, very iron rich, and that extra clay is going to create these red soils. So I've got a picture of, okay, you can see how red the soil is in these vineyards compared to the soil from Campania, Italy. From Kinnear Islands, those black volcanic ash vineyards. So this is strictly like basalt based. So in Washington State, you have the largest solid basalt bedrock plate that exists in the entire world that they know of. And it's been broken down, and different tectonic plate shifts, especially during the Jurassic era, have pulled up or pushed up basalt bedrock, and then it's become weathered down and came into Oregon. You also have all this marine sedimentary soils because of the Missoula floods that for basically 15,000 years periodically flooded all of Washington and Oregon, and created these river valleys. And the Willamette Valley was created through those intense floods. They would come at 65 miles an hour, waves higher than the Sears Tower. That's how intense these floods were. And it would take, years and years and years for them to dry up. And then eventually the ice would build up again, and then it would melt and the floods would come down again. So over 15,000 years, this happened over and over again, creating such a unique terroir and microclimates within the Willamette Valley. So you can be in one area and it's going to be one soil type, and literally step 2 feet over in a totally different soil type, which makes vineyard specificity so important in Willamette Valley. And Pinot Noir is the one grape that really showcases vineyard differences the most. It's the most subtle. It's the most like, if anyone's like a dancer and you dance with a partner at all, you know that there's like the people that can do the slightest hand movement, and then you know that you're supposed to turn one way. Slightest hand movement another way means a different move. And you don't have to be very obvious about it. It's very slight. And then that dancer, that other partner, they're in tune and they just know exactly what you mean. So that's kind of how Pinot Noir and terroir acts. The slightest differences in terroir makes a drastic, beautiful difference in Pinot Noir, and it expresses it so beautifully. So Pinot Noir is like the female of the dance partner, and terroir is like the male of the dance partnership. So I just made that analogy up, and sometimes I hate my analogies when I make them up on the fly, but I think I like that one. So. All right, so what are y'all smelling in this wine? And was anyone really surprised by how pale it was and what it smells like based on other Pinot Noirs you might have had? Whew, man. This brings me, like, the smell of Oregon Pinot Noir definitely brings me back to last year working harvest and crushing those grapes and working in the winery. And afterwards, when you get off, you just go to a different winery and taste a bunch of Pinot Noirs. It brings back a whole lot of real intense memories. All right, figs and raisins, jammy cherries. Okay, I like it. So you've got these like darker dry fruit. Loads of cherries, yes, loads and loads and loads of cherries. With hibiscus, yes, Pinot Noir will always have this like floral note, and sometimes like dried flowers, sometimes like super, super fresh flowers, but Pinot Noir will always have this floral note. Remember that for future blind tastings. Hay and leather, yes. So you've got this like feminine components of the fruit and floral qualities, and yes, you also have these masculine components of like this outdoorsy, leathery component as well. And we get some mushrooms in there. Did you get some mushrooms?
Salty.
Nice, some saltiness. Okay, salty mushrooms or just salty?
Salty mushrooms.
Salty mushrooms, okay. And so different volcanic soils are going to have higher levels of sodium, magnesium, and potassium, all of the different basically salts that we think of. Now we think of salt, just we think of sodium chloride, table salt, but you can get saltiness in your wine with potassium and magnesium as well. So while a lot of volcanic soils are really like low on the sodium and potassium side, they can be really high on the magnesium side, which this is. And so you can get this saltiness in the wine. Also, different levels of potassium are going to increase the acidity of the wine. So there is some anecdotal evidence that would suggest that the sodium, potassium, and magnesium content in volcanic soils expresses very specific flavors in the wine. Still, we don't know exactly why, but that is basically what John Szabo in his book Volcanic Wine posits, is that the levels of those three components in volcanic wines create a very distinctive flavor profile. Whether it's red or white wine, whether they're grown in ash or mixed with clay or volcanic pumice stone. So again, I told you that this class would just be a class on everything we don't know about soil and how it affects wine. So thank you for being okay with the unknown. And that's part of the romance of wine. We don't understand it all, and we might never, and especially not in our lifetime, and that's okay. Enjoy the unknown, embrace the unknown, and appreciate that we don't have it all figured out just yet. So second, the Jammy Cherry, awesome. And definitely has more depth to the nose than the sight. Yeah, the sight looks like, oh, this is gonna be a little watery, but then it just speaks. So when I was in Oregon, go ahead and taste through this wine. Tell me what you think about the taste as well, in terms of acidity, flavor profile, finish. How long does the flavor last in your mouth? So I'm at a bar in Oregon, back when we could go to bars, back when we could travel. And I'm just trying to like read my book there. It's a Friday night, and I'm just like trying to chill out after a 14-hour day. And these ladies at the sit down at the bar next to me, it was this tiny bar, only 5 seats. These 4 ladies sit down next to me, and they had obviously been tasting all day long, and were having the time of their lives. We're off in Florida, and we're super loud, pretty darn drunk when they sat down and just continued to have the party. So I'm just like glad they're having a good time. But then the whole time they're talking shit about Pinot Noir. And I'm like, why'd you come to Oregon? Like, that's the grape of Oregon. They're like, I just don't like Pinot Noir. It's too watery. It doesn't taste like anything. Like, I just like a Cabernet. Well, let me get a Cabernet. And so I ended up chatting with them because, of course, I was just trying to mind my own business. But once someone talks about Pinot Noir, I gotta get involved. So then they find out I'm a sommelier. So then they want to know my opinion about Pinot Noir. So I tell them, drinking Cabernet, I love Cabernet. We just did a blind tasting class on Cabernet. They're amazing wines. Some of the best wines in the whole world. But drinking Cabernet is a little bit more like reading a John Grisham novel. It's all up in your face, like bam, plot, page turner, page turner, page turner. And at the very end, there's no guesswork. You figured it all out. You know who was the bad guy and who was the good guy and who ended up with who. It's great. Reading Shakespeare is more like what drinking Pinot Noir is like. You're constantly second guessing yourself. What does this really mean? Am I getting this? Should I be getting this? What should I be experiencing? It's not all in your face. You have to read between the lines. It requires more effort and work to really enjoy Pinot Noir a lot of times. And so both experiences are great, just in different occasions. And so don't hate on people who love Pinot Noir, and don't hate on people who love Cabernet or Merlot or any grape, because they're all just different books that we're all reading. So, all right, so what do you think, guys? How long was the finish in your mouth? In your mouth? Were you surprised at the flavor, having smelled the wine so much? Yes. Lori, brilliant. The story reminds me of my feelings towards the movie Sideways, worst movie in the whole world, and Merlot, one of the best grapes in the whole world. Yes, I don't think I have more loathing in my heart towards a movie besides the movie Sideways. So, yeah, we won't talk too much about it, but I love Pinot Noir like he does, but I also love Merlot, and I think both are beautiful. Yeah. Taste was lighter, like the nose. Body was low, but the acid was high, and lots to think about. Okay. You thought it was going to be fruitier based on the color. Yes, it didn't turn out to be so fruit forward and jammy on the palate, did it? Let's see. Oh my word. Yes, on the palate it's just straight up mushrooms. Straight up mushrooms and forest floor and moss and all of this like wet potting soil kind of thing. But it does have this like iron grit to the finish. Yes, it is totally different. I think the smells of all those like perfumed notes and those fruitier notes turned out to be wildly different on the palate for me. This is one of those wines. Lori and Brad, you might remember this. When you went to one of the pop-up dinners, one of the IDEST pop-up dinners that I did with the 3 chefs, there was a blue cheese cheesecake at the end that had pickled strawberries with pickled mushrooms on top of the cheesecake as a dessert. Still to this day, one of the best desserts I've ever had in my entire life. And all I could think about is this, because it's so much more strawberry on the nose, but definitely like more of this greenness. And because of that salty flavor, I'm just thinking of these pickled green strawberries with mushrooms over this blue cheese cheesecake. So do you remember this dessert at all? I don't know why anyone would remember these specific details, but that is Such an interesting Pinot Noir. Awesome, cool, glad you remembered. What do y'all think? Any Pinot Noir lovers out there, does this change your or expand your idea of what Pinot Noir is or can be? Are you disappointed or excited by it? What do you think about this volcanic soiled vineyard Pinot Noir? And I know there's always a delay when you chat, when you put something in the chat room to when I can see it. So I'm trying to become better about letting people have the time to make the chat room before I jump ahead to the next subject or wine. Glad you love that cheesecake. Yeah, I thought that was one of, I still think about that dessert. Like this was like almost 2 years ago. I still think about that dessert. So makes us want to go to Oregon. Yes, can we please plan a trip to Oregon? I was talking, so I worked at Patricia Green Cellars out in Oregon. They're in Newberg, but they work with vineyards all over Willamette Valley, and he does single vineyard Pinot Noirs. His name is Jim Anderson, killer winemaker, and focuses on site specificity. So rather than just a blended Pinot Noir, he uses specific vineyard sites. So he makes like 35 different Pinot Noirs every single year because he wants to showcase the different vineyard sites and sometimes different blocks of the same vineyard. So I was talking about what they were doing for harvest, and he basically had to buy new equipment so that he could do everything with just one harvest person instead of 5 like we did last year. And it's just wild what these winemakers are having to do to think about harvesting their grapes in light of coronavirus when you can't have the traveling workers or interns or anything. Think about them while we drink our wines and enjoy them, especially in the coming years, about how hard this harvest will be for everyone. So definitely when this is all over, I would love to lead a trip to Oregon. That'd be awesome. Very nice, good warm weather red. Okay, I like it. Yeah, because it's super light. It's gonna be a little bit more along the refreshing side of red wines for sure. Definitely explains the thought of Pinot. Awesome, thank you. That's always the goal in these classes, is to not confirm your beliefs about a specific wine necessarily, but to always be expanding. That's my goal as a sommelier, to always expand my own ideas of different grapes and different regions and what wine can be. And I hope that those come through in the classes. So I tend to like volcanic soil wines, Lori says, and I'm typically not an overly fan of Pinot and less drinking from a proper Pinot glass. But this was nice, a bit earthier. Cool. So you're right, a Pinot Noir glass is going to be a little bit more bulbous and kind of curve out more. This is a typical Cabernet glass, massive. But Pinot Noir glasses, because they have a delicate nose, like an aromatic of the wine itself, that cupping of the top of the glass kind of allows those delicate esters to be captured by the glass. So Pinot Noir glasses are definitely, like, glassware does make a difference. I think most things are gimmicks in the wine world, unfortunately, but glassware is definitely not a gimmick. So thank you for demonstrating. This would be a Pinot Noir glass. And so that tapering of the glass as it goes up allows for those aromatics to be kind of captured, so the delicacy comes through, and so you're not just getting alcohol on the nose. So,
question.
Yeah.
Can you taste the difference between a volcanic Pinot Noir and a non-volcanic?
Great question. So some mom asked, can I taste the difference between a volcanic Pinot Noir and a non-volcanic Pinot Noir? And yes. So I went to Oregon with the express mission because, let's face it, Pinot Noir is expensive, right? Like, it's very finicky grape to grow. It's very expensive grape to grow. It's very disease prone. And so you end up losing a lot of the fruit kind of no matter what throughout harvest. Take a lot of precautions to make Pinot Noir taste good, which means that the wine's going to be expensive if it's going to be quality wine. So it's not something that I'm going to buy lots of to just drink by myself, especially not side by side. But I definitely took the opportunity while in Oregon to taste as many Pinot Noirs as possible and to always note in my tasting notebooks what soil type the vineyard was that it came from. And my goal was, like, at the end of the 4 weeks, I want to be able to blind taste Pinot Noirs and tell which one comes from volcanic soil and which one comes from marine sedimentary soil. And I could at the end. I actually did a test. I was like, line them up, baby, and I passed the test. But I would have to probably try it again now because it's been almost a year since I was out there. So
what was the key difference?
The key difference to me is like literally the minerality and the textural grip of the wine. Saltiness for sure, that iron content you're going to have in both, but it seemed more pronounced in volcanic soil. And to me, the volcanic soil had this tension that I don't know if I can accurately put to words, but the wine seemed like it had more tension. There was friction in the wine. It seemed like there was this verve to the wine versus marine sedimentary Pinot Noirs seemed just much more like less, fluid, smoother. Something seemed less frictionless about it. It's the only way I can know how to describe it. Sometimes it's hard to put to words the specific experiences we have when we taste wine. It's always the goal is to try and put it to words, but sometimes it's okay to let it be a feeling. And yes, so that verve and that tension I found very pronounced with Volcanic Soil Vineyard Pinot Noirs versus like this rounder, richer, more feminine style, softer, less of this the gritty, powerful wines. So great question. I hope I answered it. But as I said, I warned everyone this was going to be a class of everything I didn't know how to say. So, all right. So we're going to do our last wine of the evening. This is an Aglianico. Aglianico is the name of the grape. The G is silent, so it's Aglianico. Some people will even call it Aglianico, just with a Y, Aglianico, or Aglianico, depending. The region itself is Irpinia, which encompasses the region of Greco de Tufo as well. So we're in very similar region. And so go ahead and pour yourself some of this. We get totally different here, as you can tell from the color, the concentration, everything about this wine is the exact opposite of the wine we just had, except for the fact that both Volcanic Vineyards. Take a look at that color and concentration. This is the definition of purple in terms of wine coloring, and this is the definition of deeply concentrated wine, so high levels of concentration in this wine. So remember, we're going back to the black ashy soil. We do have some calcareous clay in this area. I'm going to bring up some pictures of these vines. We're going to talk about why vines grown in volcanic soil are some of the oldest vines in the entire world. So if you can see this, this is Senor Leonardo, the winemaker and owner of Canteen Leonardo, the wine that we're drinking right now. That is a grapevine. I know it looks like a tree. It is a grapevine. He is 6 feet tall. I think he was actually like 6'2" or 6'3". Very, very tall man. That is a very tall vine. This vine was grown or planted in the 1850s. So we're talking, what is that, 70 years old now? No, I'm sorry, 170 years old now. I was like 70 years old. That's not right. 170 years old now. So you have some of the oldest vines in the entire world are in this area of Campania. And here's why. So there's this little tiny louse, part of the aphid family, called Phylloxera. Phylloxera is native to the east coast of the United States, and it likes to eat the vines of the roots of the vines. And what it does is it chews on the roots of the vines and sucks out the moisture, and thus allows the vine roots themselves to absorb all these diseases that are in the soils themselves. So it makes it very sick and eventually dies because the roots themselves are dying. Phylloxera is native to the east coast of the U.S. In the 1800s, when the Europeans are colonizing the Americas, they're going back and forth, and there was no customs here to say, like, you're not allowed to bring that thing over here. They did anyway. So they brought vines from the Americas to Europe, and they brought vines from Europe to the Americas and wanted to experiment, see what grows, what doesn't. So they inadvertently brought Phylloxera to Europe. And between 1850 and 1920, killed off, anyone want to take a guess what percentage of European vines were killed as a result of phylloxera during those 60 to 70 years, 1850 to 1910. Anyone want to take a guess? What's your guess, Mom?
85.
Her guess is 85. Let's try 99.9% of vines all died. It created one of the most economic travesties of modern history because wine was connected so much to travel and industry and economic trade. So 99.9% of vines were killed off in those 70 years, but it turns out phylloxera does not survive in volcanic soils. Couple different reasons. One, it likes organic matter in volcanic soil. And volcanic soil, while being really fertile because it has all of those nutrients coming from the ground that have not been leached coming up, doesn't have organic matter. So phylloxera doesn't like that. Phylloxera likes more clay, it likes more moisture in the actual soil, and it likes a different pH balance. So for all these reasons, phylloxera does not survive in volcanic soil or soil that's too sandy. So there's a couple places in the world that still have roots that have existed since before phylloxera. They call them pre-phylloxera vines. And we're talking this area of Italy. We're talking Santorini, Greece, Barossa, Australia, oddly enough, even though it's not volcanic, for whatever reason, the elevation and different soil types, phylloxera doesn't exist in Barossa, and the entire country of Chile, and obviously Canary Islands too. So volcanic soil allows for some of these vines to be incredibly old, and they're on what we call original rootstock. So I'm sorry this has been such a history and geology lesson, but bear with me just for this last one. When these vines died off, they could not ever plant them again on the original roots because European roots were really, really thin-skinned and softer, so the louse really loved them, versus American rootstock, think muscadine, scuppernong, Norton, Concord grape. Those roots are really, really tough. The skin is really thick, and so the louse couldn't eat through them. So what they did to finally be able to replant vines, they had to figure this out. They took American rootstock of muscadine, scuppernong, etc. They grafted on European vines like Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, Aglianico, anything you can think of that is made into premium wines, European roots, European vines. They grafted those vines, basically just tied the vine to the American rootstock, so they eventually become one. So the actual grape that we want can grow, but the roots themselves are going to be too tough for phylloxera because now it's throughout the whole world except for the regions that I mentioned. And so there's nothing to be done about it. There's no spray. There's nothing to be done except for just plant it on American rootstock. So very few places in the whole world have vines that are older than 1850 and vines that are on like the original rootstock, not American rootstock, not grafted. These are some of those vines planted in the 1850s and beyond. And the reason that they're planted super high and trellised up like trees is because the peasants in this area were not making premium wine to export. They were just making wine to drink, but they couldn't waste their whole vineyard. They couldn't waste their whole 1 acre plot that they had just on grapevines. That would be a waste. So they would trellis their grapevines up high so that they could plant their other crops that they would survive on, their subsistence farmers, down below. So they're cross-utilizing the vines. Same thing in the Canary Islands. You have these untrained, really, really long vines that sometimes stretch for 25 feet. And so basically, if anyone goes to the gym, you see those battling ropes. It was basically like that. So as they plant one row of potatoes, Canary Islands loves their potatoes, then they would just move the vine, the vine cane, not from the root, but the stretch of the vine, just one area over, and then put it over here as the potatoes season is over. And now they're going to plant this other fruit over here. And they just like constantly be moving this whole long train of vines. So really interesting to see how the history of basically just subsistence farming and people growing vines to make wine to drink has continued to exist in their traditional ways when you have these vines that are 150 plus years old. So really, really fascinating. That's what we're drinking here. Aglianico is known to be like the most high-toned grape. So anything that you can think of that's in this wine, the flavor, it's either all or nothing, the most extreme grape possible. So high levels of acidity, high levels of tannins, there are high levels of fruit, very, very salty and briny as well, very grippy, very powerful, like zero level of sweetness. Every component of wine is either all or nothing. Whatever astrological sign that is, where it's always super extremes, that's what sign this this wine is. So tell me, oh my word, it just like was a punch in the face smelling that after all these like other wines. What are you smelling in this wine and tasting in this wine? Great question. How do I spell phylloxera? So it's Phylloxera. I don't know why anyone gets that. Phylloxera. If you meet this woman in a biker bar, watch out. I love it. Yes, she got neck tats. Yeah. I love it. Yes, real powerful wine. Oh man. So Aglianico can last for a very long time. This is meant to actually be their entry tier, easy drinking Aglianico. Their higher end stuff is from a region of Campania called Taurasi. Some of my favorite wines in the entire world come from this area. All Aglianico grape, not blended at all, and are just some of the most intriguing, thought-provoking red wines ever, and so powerful because of the high levels of tannins, acidity, and acid in the wine. I mean, sorry, we already talked about, and saltiness in the wine. This wine could last for decades, even at this, but the Taurasis can last for you know, a very, very long time. 50 years, easy. So if you're interested in thinking about wines to age or wines to lay down and kind of guarantee that they're going to be good, you're kind of always good with Aglianico. It has all of the components. Alcohol percentage on this is only 13.5, which is the sweet spot for aging wine too. Any higher than that, and oddly enough, your wine becomes a little bit more volatile. So you kind of want that 13.5 sweet point in there. Smells a little funky. Highest tannins of the night. Oh yeah. I haven't even tasted it yet, but my gums are already starting to dry out just smelling the wine. I mean, I tasted it before the class, but let's see. Whew. Oh yeah. That is an assault on the gums. An assault on the tongue. It's just like eating Kalamata olives. You know, you always have that friend who doesn't eat olives, or maybe you're that friend. And so at the end, I love olives. I'll just be like, oh, give me all your olives. Not anymore. We shouldn't share food with COVID. But before, I would just have at the end of the meal, just a huge plate of olives of all my friends who don't like olives, and I just eat them all. I feel like that's just what happened in my mouth. Kalamata olives and all of these figs. I love that raisinated call. Great call, James. All of the fruit is like raisinated, prune-esque. Dried out figs, dates, all of these like dried out raisinated flavors. So fruit forward, red fruits, very ripe and jammy, some floral, great rose and potpourri. Yes. Anytime I say potpourri now, it makes me laugh. It's like, what? That's a word. Yes, and vanilla. Yeah, I love all of those calls. Great calls. I'm thought, way to go. He confessed to me that sometimes he threw things out in the chat room just to see how I'm gonna react. So now I know that I can do other things besides like, interesting note. Moving on. So that's good. Keeps me on my toes. I like it. I do love that about Aglianico. As deep and dark and dense as it is, it does have this red fruited quality. It has all these dark fruits too, but it does have this red fruited quality that keeps it being too heavy. And the acidity also just brings it up. It kind of like lifts the wine, creates some dimension that's less dense in the wine. So really, really interesting. What else are y'all, how did y'all experience this wine? What did you think overall? Obviously, for radically different wines, that was kind of the goal of tonight, was to just showcase the wide expanse that wines can be when they're grown in volcanic soil. So It is so acidic and tannic that I can't tell how complex it is underneath. Great call. So this is wine that could definitely stand some decanting. The reason I don't tell people to decant their wines before these classes, some people are, you know, they're getting off work at 5:30, they're getting home by 6 or something like that. So 6 o'clock is kind of the start time. Some people don't have decanters. I would like everyone who's participating in the class to kind of enjoy the wine the same way. So our tasting notes, or at least we all know we're experiencing wine the same way. This wine could stand to be decanted. So if you want to drink the rest of it tonight, great. I suggest though, if you can, put a cork on this, try it again tomorrow night, maybe even throw it in a decanter for 30 to 45 minutes beforehand. Will radically soften the wine, and drink the other 3 wines tonight if you like and if you can. So someone says it invites you into a bit longer conversation. It's intriguing. Yeah, it kind of pulls you in. It's not just a, what's up, how you doing, I'm out. It's definitely, let's sit down and chat, and let's chat about the meaning of life. I like it. So Lori, y'all, when I did your virtual Zoom tasting with you and Gwen in DC, trying to think if we did do the Chinito Alianico, right? By Luigi Maffini from the same area. Does this remind you of that at all, or is it totally different? And for those of you who this might be their first time trying Alianico grape, does it remind you of anything, or is this is a new one? This is totally different, totally unique than anything else I've had before. Or does it bring back some memories? Like it reminds me of Merlot meets Sangiovese and they have a baby or something like that. I don't think it does, but that one specifically.
This is the one.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I love it. Some mom saves the tags of the wines that I've given her that she really enjoys. So, and this is in Alianico. Different producer, Mastro Barandino, but also from Irpinia, 2014 vintage. I love it. It's cool. That's what these tags are there for, to hopefully make your life easier. Speaking of, we need to book another Zoom. Yes, as soon as it's cool enough to ship some wine, I am down. It is too hot now to do long distance events and ship wine because wine's just going to cook, but definitely let's chat soon. James says, very intrigued, going to definitely seek out more of it to try. Danielle loves it. Okay, awesome, awesome. This is definitely like the Canary Islands White, a little bit more of a polarizing grape because it's so intense. You're either gonna like really love it and enjoy how intense it is and how intrigued you are by it, or you're just gonna be like, whoa, like this is too much. This wine could definitely be like your steak wine, your burrs. It needs something that's going to match the flavor intensity. It needs something for that acid and tannins to grip onto, so something a little bit fattier. So don't go filet mignon with this. Go New York strip, like go something with some richness to it for sure. We have now completed all 4 of the wines from our Volcanic Soils virtual class. Everyone should see the next classes up online soon. I just didn't about them this week, but I'll put them up on Facebook, and my website will finally be finished hopefully soon. It's just me that's been dragging my feet. But if anyone has any ideas of fall classes, because August is planned out, but now we can think about September, October, and on, please let me know. You all have my email address. You have my cell phone number, Facebook, Instagram, anything. Let me know. I'm always curious to see what you actually want to learn more about in this time that we're stuck with virtual classes. So fun and enlightening. Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. See you at the limestone class. Yes, the limestone class is going real cool. Thank you all so much for tuning in tonight on this Wino Wednesday. I hope you have a glorious evening, and I hope to see you again in real life soon. Until then, stay safe and sane and healthy, and I will talk to you later. All right, cheers.